Welcome back to the Let's Grow podcast. It's your girl Lex Lux. I'm your host, and today we're going to be talking about doing business God's way. And I mean business, because look, we got notes. We got notes today. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I just want to preface this episode with a very specific scripture that has stuck with me throughout my entrepreneur journey, and then we're going to get into it. So Proverbs 16:9. Let me read it, because I don't even want to get it wrong. Y'all not about to talk about me. I know what it say, but I want to make sure I know what it say. Proverbs 16:9. A man's heart plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps. So let's talk about that in real life, in real time. July of 2019, we could say, was when I felt like the Lord planted the seed of entrepreneurship in my heart, which is actually funny because I come from a family of entrepreneurs. My dad's side of the family, they all have their own businesses. They've all had a business, even if they don't have it anymore. They've had multiple businesses. My great grandparents have a restaurant. Like, it's just in us. And I would always joke and say, I wasn't passionate about anything enough to start a business. And then I surrendered my life to Christ. I grew in my relationship with God. And then one day I just remember I was praying and I was like, Lord, I know who I want to be, but show me who you want me to be. Show me why you put me on this earth. Who do you desire that I become? And I just felt like this seed was planted for me to start a boutique, and it would be like a one-stop shop where you could get almost anything. Like, think about when we used to go in Forever 21, and Forever 21 had different walls. This wall would be like edgy leather, that type of thing. This wall would be like dainty flowers, pastel, light colors, soft silk satin. But then there would be like an area where it was like basics or a rack full of denim. And there was something for everyone. That's what I envisioned for Lex Lux Essentials. It didn't immediately come out that way, but in time and prayer, like I began to flesh it out that way. So stay with me. July 2019, I thought about it. And I didn't say it out loud. I didn't really want to make it real. It just was something that was like in my mind. And then I told someone, and they were like, it'd be really cool if you did this. And I was like, no, that's not where I wanted to go with that. But in just hearing them say that, something in me was just like, well, maybe I'm not supposed to do it then. And there was kind of like this seed of discouragement, like, you don't really mean it. You're not really interested in that. And I put it down, and I didn't think about it again until December of that year. And then I was like, okay, let's just give it a shot. So over winter break, I was in college. So over winter break, I was on YouTube every day for probably about 3 hours a day, just researching how people started their online boutiques, the paperwork that they needed to register with the state, and how they do this, and how they do taxes, and what vendors are where, and how do you get this number and that number, and all the things. And then I just started. In January, I just kind of like built out like a template website, and I started looking for vendors, and I was like, let's do it. Here's the thing though, when it came time to like order the inventory, I didn't have like a method for what I was ordering. I just was like, oh, that's cute. That's cute. Oh, that, like, I just was like, I get that, I get that. No method to my madness. And I was like, I'll launch in March. No marketing plan. No plan, no huge rollout on Instagram, nothing. I just posted something like maybe 2 weeks before, and I was like, boutique opening soon. And the funniest part about all of this is that the day that I wanted to launch the boutique was actually the day that everything shut down. The day that I was taking the photos for like the website, I found out that my dad was like one of the first people to have COVID, and he was actually in the hospital because he was not getting better. And it just was like, this wasn't in my plans. Like, I didn't expect these. Like, I'm doing what God told me. You gave me the desire. Like, huh? But I I was like, okay, I'm gonna just do it. And I rushed the whole process of like launching. And when everything started to come out about like code, I forgot you could get dinged on YouTube for that word. I'm sorry. About the pandemic. Maybe. I don't know what to say and what not to say, but y'all know what I'm talking about. 2020, March 2020, you do the math. When everything started coming out and people were talking about it, I was like, let me just hurry up and release it. I released it and nobody, my friend Bethany was the only person that bought it. She was the only person that supported, and I know she just supported because it was me, but like nobody was paying attention. And had I prayed and prepared properly, I would have known this isn't the right time. I would have discerned that maybe I should have waited or I should have done it differently, but I just was winging it. I had took what God said and I walked away. And I was just doing what I wanted to do. And I was like, okay, like my feelings were really hurt. It was one of the first disappointments that I experienced after surrendering my life to Christ. And I was like, what did I do wrong? Like, where did I go wrong? What happened here? And I felt like that's when people started actually, because if you know me, I'm very consistent. So even though I wasn't getting like sales, I was still consistently posting. I was consistently promoting it. And I was moving as if it was successful without it actually being successful. And that's just that little entrepreneur delusion in me. But what I began to realize was in 2020, so many people were starting businesses before and after the whole PP loan situation. I didn't get one of those because I was scary. I should have. If it ever happened again, I promise I'm getting one. My paperwork is ready. My paperwork is ready. But no, so many people were starting businesses, and a few people would come to me and ask me questions about how to start the business and how do I like organize my stuff and how do I do it, and ask me about my website. And then that turned into me doing a website for somebody that was making way more money than I was. Like, she was popular and her business was already established. She was doing a really good job and she needed help with the website, and I helped her with it. And I was like, well, it worked for her, why it don't work for me? But in reality, God was showing me that it wasn't about the actual business itself, but it was about what he was doing in me through the business. And I felt like the Holy Spirit was telling me that me having a business or being a business owner is not about the business itself, but doing business God's way and demonstrating that as the way to go. So that changed my perspective a little bit, because now I wasn't focused on people not buying, but I was more so focused on like, am I doing this with integrity? Am I doing this with character? Am I doing this the way that God is telling me to do it? Or am I just doing what I think the crowd wants? And that shifted everything for me. So I went back to the drawing board that summer and I worked that whole summer, saved a lot of money, and I went back at it on. But in all reality, I didn't have like a set relaunch date until I felt like he gave me my relaunch dates. Then I was listening to 828 by Lecrae, and I was like, 828, I think I'm gonna do it on August 28th. I'm gonna relaunch on August 28th, not knowing that that song was based on Romans 8:28, which became my utmost favorite scripture because it was one of the first things that I felt like God was speaking to me through. And I was like, okay, we're doing that. Romans 8:28, all things work together for the good of those that love the Lord and walk according to his purpose. So I relaunched in August, and this time I was fully committed and submitted to what I felt like God wanted to do. And I was like, okay, God, if I'm going to do business your way, and I understand that that is the bigger mission, then I'm going to do it, and I'm going to consider you in it, and I'm going to not do anything without asking or considering. I'll say considering, because we can get in the weeds when it comes to like asking and things like that. But so that's my story. And then in August, when I did relaunch the boutique, my cousin, shout out to Seisha, did like a pop-up shop. And that was like my first event as like a relaunch boutique, more inventory, better inventory. It was amazing and I did really well. And from there, I felt like I just kind of took off, and it was doing really well for about 2 years. And I think I had got in this groove of just doing it and going with the motions that I lost sight of the larger point of doing business God's way. And people began to like request things from the boutique, and I would do it because I'm like, oh, they're loyal, they spend money, I'm gonna get them whatever they desire. I was leaning the business toward what people wanted versus what me and God had talked about from the very beginning. I was not sticking to the plan that we had. And I would say end of 23, going into 2024, the economy changed drastically to where I would hear people talk about like their house insurance doubling or just inflation and groceries and all the prices of all the things going up, and people slowly stop buying inventory because you got to think about it. When times are harder or things are changing, people slow up on spending money, and clothes are not a priority unless you're like in this major like weight loss journey, but like clothes are not a priority. So things slowed down, and I was like, what's going on, God? And I found myself seeking him again like I did in the very beginning. But at that point, I felt like, oh my goodness, like I've kind of been doing this without you for a little while, probably for about 6 months. I've been doing this on my own. I've been people pleasing. I've been ordering things that don't have anything to do with the mission. If I say I sell essentials, why am I ordering all these random things? Like when I went back to him, I realized how far I had gotten. And I was like, okay, God. And in that, it was also a reminder to me of God's sovereignty, because had I stayed close to him, I know for a fact, or not even, I wouldn't even say that. I would honestly say that there were times where I felt like the Holy Spirit may have been telling me, don't order as much. Or I would go to order like some inventory and it would be like sold out or something, or there would be an error with it. And I'm like, okay. In my mind, I'm like, oh, the devil is busy. But in reality, that probably was God's sovereignty, and he was probably looking out for me to say, like, slow up on the inventory because you're not going to be pushing out as much as you would normally push out. And I think that's important to keep in mind, because if I had to explain doing business God's way, I have 3 principles for it. Number 1 would be the importance of being sensitive to the Spirit in praying and spending quality time with God, because that's the only way that you know someone is if you spend time with them, right? Spending that quality time and remaining sensitive to his spirit in prayer, through fasting, through consistently seeking the Lord's face, you begin to discern the times and the seasons. You begin to discern when you should make this decision versus when you should make this decision. Number 2 would be praying for insight and foresight. When I began to pray for insight and foresight, I began to think with the times and the seasons, but also the mission of my business. What is this representing? Am I ordering this because I just want to please the people that are requesting it, or does this fully back the mission of my business to provide essential clothing for women that want clothing that is convenient, comfortable, and makes them feel confident, right? And then also that third thing would be knowing your source versus resources, because when I began to people please and I began to just answer to what people were requesting, I was treating them as my source. Like, well, if I don't get it, they're going to stop shopping from me. They're going to find another boutique to shop with. I got to keep them because they are the people that bring my money in. Like, they're my VIP clients. They are my loyal people. But in reality, they're not the source. God is the source. So why am I so hung up on pleasing them and not upsetting them or making sure that they're getting their way, when in reality, God is my source and he's going to provide for what he desires to provide for. He's going to provide for what is in his will, his bill, right? He's going to provide for what he wants to see go out into the earth. And I know that I'm talking about this in a way that is very like important or urgent, and I'm also talking about me selling clothes, and I know that clothes are not necessarily, like homes or something, I don't know, but it is important, my heart posture of the way that I do this business, because what he trusts me with, I have to treat as my assignment. I have to treat it as my mission. I have to treat it as something that is precious, because he trusted me with it, right? Not only did he trust me with, of course, the shirt, the set, the dress, but he trusted me with the resources that I can provide through the purchasing of that. So, for an example, if I make 6 figures a year in my boutique, And let's say I use a percentage of that to go back into the business, a percentage of that to pay myself and my overhead, and then a percentage of that to fund opportunities like the Cultivate Conference and Bosses Breaking Bread and my nonprofit and the events that we hope to do with that, and toy drives and food drives and hurricane support for people that need it. It's so much bigger than just the clothes, right? Because those resources that come from those clothes will fund his kingdom. That's why I started a business. That's why I felt like I could do the business when he planted the desire in my heart, because I said, I'm going to use it for your people. I'm going to use it to serve your kingdom and to do more in your kingdom and for your kingdom versus just for my own personal gain. Because I could make all this money and just keep it for myself, but my heart is not built or shaped in that way. Like, I'm just not that kind of person. I always want to do free stuff, and that's my problem. Quite frankly, that is my problem, because I always want to help people. But God knew that, and that's why he trusted me with this business. That's why he's trusted me with Bosses Block. That's why he's trusted me with the Brace Project, my nonprofit with Megan. Like, God knows my heart, and he knows that my goal is to serve. My heart is made to serve. So when it comes to understanding that he is the source and that he provides the resources through the boutique, that reminds me of why I'm doing this. And it reminds me to stick to the mission, because if I lose sight of that, I'm in trouble. If I lose sight of the importance of being sensitive to his spirit, I'm in trouble. If I'm not praying for insight and foresight for what's to come and what's ahead of me, I'm in trouble, right? So I would encourage each and every one of you as entrepreneurs for your business or your brand to keep those three things in mind: the importance of being sensitive to the Holy Spirit, praying for insight and foresight consistently, as well as knowing who your source is and the resources that he provides. Because when you have those three things top of mind, you know to keep the main thing, and to stick to the plan. But when those things are not in mind, you're going to just be on this hamster wheel of hustling. Scared money don't make no money. Just consistently trying to up the last best thing that you've done. And that's not what it is when you're doing business God's way. And I wanted to talk about this because this is actually the theme for Bosses Breaking Bread this year. Bosses Breaking Bread is on July 12th, and we're talking about doing business God's way. We're talking about biblical principles for business owners, and I am so excited. It is a small, intimate day retreat where we sit down and we discuss biblical principles for being a business owner. And then we also have a strategic planning session for the rest of the year. It is in July, so we're at that halfway point of the year, and I want to get you ready for quarter 3 and quarter 4 with divine insight as well as strategic planning. So I'm really excited for that. If you are in the New Orleans area, you need to grab your ticket. It's for both men and women. You can grab your ticket at bossesblock.com. Bossesblock.com. And you can follow us at bosses.block on Instagram. So I wanted to have this episode to talk about it because while we're going to go deeper into it at the actual retreat, I understand that not everybody can come to the retreat. And I do feel like this message has been oozing out of my spirit as of recently. I have been thinking about this. I've been studying up on this for a few months now, and I just think that it's important that we know it. Like, if you're going to do business God's way, then you need to do business God's way, and you need to know what that means and what that looks like. For me, when we go through that whole process that I just ran down about Lex Lux, there were a lot of small things that I felt like added up to what I should have seen or what I could have saw as like a sign to kind of like say, whoa, I must have drifted somewhere, right? A big one is clarity. So when I was being very intentional in considering God and everything that I did, I had a lot of clarity in the business, and I wasn't overthinking anything, underthinking it, impulsively buying or anything like that. Like, I had clarity, I was prepared, and I had plans. And then when I began to kind of just drift out of that and not consider him as much, and I became more people focused, I did not have clarity. I was often confused. I was often indecisive when it came to choosing inventory, because I was like just not thinking about it from a way of like, this is the mission and this is what we do. I was thinking about it and like, this person asked for this person asked for that. It's about time for people to start buying this, so I got to think about that. And I was just branching out into all these things and just letting people get in my ear. It was a lot and I did not have clarity, right? I would also say peace kind of goes hand in hand with that, because I would order inventory and I would have peace about it. I wouldn't think twice as to like, is it gonna work? Is it gonna be, I wonder what's gonna be the piece that's popular. Like, I wasn't even worried about that. In my mind, I was like, God got it, it's his. But then when I started ordering stuff for other people, I'm like, well, if only 2 people requested it, but I have to order so many packs, then how am I gonna sell the other 20? And that's like how my mind thought about it, I guess. And I did not have a lot of peace in those moments. And then I also think that, like, not from the boutique side, but for conference, when it comes to the Cultivate conference, provision came in every direction when I wasn't being like impulsive or just doing things the way that I wanted it to do. And I just was truly letting God lead me. And my heart posture was different when it came to, like, because I've done 3 conferences and each time it's gotten better. The first time there were things that I know for a fact God probably would have told me to do differently. There were things in the second time he was like, yeah, you could tweak that, you could do that, you know. But the third time I was like fully surrendered. I was in a place where I was asking the Lord to search my heart and take out the things that were not like him. And I was truly in my David era. I'm laughing, y'all, but I'm serious. And provision just came from every direction. Like, things that I hadn't even thought about or had the foresight to think about, God was taking care of it. Like, things that I thought that I had released, like, I was like, oh, I can't get that. Okay, I'm sad about it, but it is what it is. I'm gonna trust God. And then I would end up getting it. Like, provision literally came from every direction when I was doing business his way. And I was considering his principles, I was considering his character, and I was considering who he is and how do I become like Christ. We know that we are not Christ, but we are supposed to become like him. So those were huge when it came to like conference side. Provision was everywhere. And it makes a difference. It makes such a difference. And I think that something, or probably the biggest mistake in not doing business God's way, was that I began to idolize the business. And this is, I'm going back to more about the boutique because I can think about it and know that that was a huge issue for me. I began to idolize the boutique. It was my life. You know why? Because it was all I had in that season, in all honesty. I am a 2-time graduate of college. I have my social work license. I am single. I didn't have anything else to do, quite frankly. I don't have no kids. Like, there was nothing else. And for me, I'm very like goal oriented, project oriented. So when I hone in on something, I'm in it. And that's pretty much how it was when it came to the boutique, because it was like, I ain't got nothing else to do. Let's grow. Let's grow this business. Let's do it. I was all in. It was everything business, business, business. And that's kind of when you saw like that drift of like people pleasing and things like that, because I was like, oh, this is working. This is rewarding me. I feel good about this. It was self-pleasing, self-preserving in a way, right? But when I realized that it was an idol, and I repented and I was like, God, I don't even play like that. Don't worry about it. I'm sorry. That's when everything changed. And that's when I began to pray about it and really get to the root of where I went wrong. Because for a second, I didn't know. I couldn't understand it. I was like, this business was doing so well 2 years ago. Now I make like a fraction of what I was making. I don't really see a lot of engagement on social media. What's going on? Like, what do I have to change? And I'm a student, right? Like, I study a lot of things. I am always on YouTube. I'm always reading, looking at how to do things better in a more efficient way sometimes. And I think that just couldn't figure it out. But in reality, it didn't have nothing to do with any of those things. It was my heart posture. My heart posture was not in doing business God's way. It was doing what I wanted to do. It was doing what pleased me, what glorified me, what made me the boss, right? But it was when I decided, no, I'm doing business God's way, that everything changed for me. We saw conference go from 50 people to 120 people. Like, that's crazy. Like, mind blowing. Can't even wrap my head around that concept, right? The boutique. I have been in this season of taking a break for a few months, and I am now about to relaunch. And I'm so excited to relaunch because I have so much more clarity. I'm like, I know my mission, I'm sticking to my mission, and I have wisdom from the mistakes that I made in the past to actually do it God's way. And I'm really excited for that. And you'll see me talk about that more. Probably, I'm doing an episode on faith. I'll talk about that more in the episode about faith because a lot of those things stems from unbelief and disappointment and needing to build up my faith, right? So, as we close out this episode, I want you to think about whose voice have you been building from? Have you been building from God's voice and His vision for your business, or have you been building on your audience's voice and their vision for your business? And I want you to say, okay, if I am building from the audience, how do I make that switch? And I want you to pray about that. Because for me, I feel like God had to bring me back to the beginning and remind me of why I started my business. Because I thought, well, maybe the grace is lifted. Maybe the season is just over. And I was ready to walk away from the boutique. And he was like, no, 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 no. The assignment still hasn't changed. It's the way that you're going to complete the assignment that has changed. So I want you to keep those things in mind and let me know what you think in the comments. Of course, if this episode reminded you that it's time to do business God's way, then I want to see you at Bosses Breaking Bread this summer, July 12th. In New Orleans, Louisiana, from 1 to 4 p.m. I hope you can make it. It is a ticketed event because meals and workshop materials are provided. So make sure you get your ticket at bossesblock.com. Don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe, and let me know what you guys think. And don't forget to grow. Peace.